Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about cravings, but not in the way most health content frames them, because here is what most people don't realize. Acting on certain cravings repeatedly doesn't just mean consuming foods that aren't ideal. It means repeatedly triggering a chain of hormonal, microbial, and inflammatory responses that compound with each cycle. The craving isn't just making you eat something. It is driving a biological process that, over time, is making you genuinely sick. The first link in the chain is the craving itself and where it actually comes from. The second link is what happens in the gut when you satisfy that craving. Refined sugar and processed carbohydrates create a gut environment that selectively favors pro-inflammatory bacterial strains at the expense of beneficial ones. Each time you respond to the craving with the food it demands, you are feeding the bacterial populations that generated the craving in the first place, and suppressing the populations that would produce a more balanced, less reactive gut environment. According to research, even short-term high-sugar dietary patterns produce measurable reductions in bifidobacterium and lactobacillus populations within days. The bacteria most associated with gut lining integrity, serotonin regulation, and immune calibration. In one study, participants who consumed a diet high in added sugars for 2 weeks showed significant shifts in microbiome composition toward profiles associated with gut inflammation, increased intestinal permeability, and higher systemic inflammatory markers. 2 weeks. And the cravings at the end of those 2 weeks were measurably stronger than at the start, because the bacterial populations driving them had grown. This is the loop closing on itself. The craving generates eating. The eating grows the population that generates the craving. The craving returns stronger. The eating follows. And each cycle leaves the gut environment slightly more dysbiotic, slightly more permeable, and slightly more inflamed than before. The third link is where the gut damage begins producing systemic consequences. As the gut lining degrades under the combined pressure of dysbiosis and repeated exposure to inflammatory dietary patterns, its selectivity decreases. The tight junctions between intestinal cells loosen. Bacterial byproducts, lipopolysaccharides or LPS, begin leaking into the bloodstream in quantities the immune system was not designed to ignore. The immune response this triggers is not dramatic. It is low-grade, chronic, and systemic. And it produces effects across multiple organ systems simultaneously. According to research, circulating LPS levels in individuals with high ultra-processed food intake are significantly elevated compared to those eating primarily whole foods, and those elevated LPS levels are independently associated with insulin resistance, disrupted leptin signaling, neuroinflammation, elevated cardiovascular risk markers, and measurably altered mood and cognitive function. You are not just experiencing gut symptoms. The inflammation generated in the gut is traveling and landing in the brain, the joints, the skin, the cardiovascular system, the hormonal network. In one study, elevated LPS was found to directly impair the blood-brain barrier, allowing inflammatory signals to reach neural tissue and interfere with dopamine and serotonin synthesis. Which means the same gut dysfunction that is driving the craving is also degrading the neurochemical environment that makes the craving harder to resist. The system is rigged. The sicker the gut gets, the stronger the pullback toward the foods that made it sick. The fourth link is the hormonal environment, and this is where the illness becomes most visible. Chronic gut-derived inflammation disrupts insulin signaling, promoting insulin resistance and the blood glucose volatility that intensifies cravings for fast fuel. It suppresses leptin sensitivity, meaning the satiety signal that should stop eating does not arrive cleanly. It elevates cortisol, which promotes visceral fat storage, suppresses immune function, and further degrades gut barrier integrity. It reduces thyroid hormone conversion. As I've discussed before, the gut plays a direct role in activating T4 into the usable T3, slowing metabolism and deepening the fatigue that makes every healthy habit harder to sustain. According to research, individuals with the highest dietary craving scores show measurably more disrupted hormonal profiles, higher fasting insulin, lower free T3, blunted leptin response, and elevated inflammatory cytokines than those with stable eating patterns. The cravings are not just a symptom of this disruption. They are actively contributing to it with every cycle. Each episode of craving-driven eating feeds the microbial and inflammatory machinery that produces more hormonal disruption, which generates more cravings. The fifth and final link is the one that closes the argument completely, and the one I think most people need to hear most. The experience of being sick, the fatigue, the bloating, the mood instability, the brain fog, the joint aches, the skin reactivity, creates the very conditions under which cravings are strongest. Stress activates carbohydrate cravings through the serotonin shortcut. Fatigue drives sugar seeking through ghrelin elevation. Low mood increases dopamine seeking behavior directed toward high reward foods. Gut dysbiosis intensifies the microbial demand signals for the foods that feed it. According to research, breaking this cycle requires addressing the gut environment directly, not through restriction alone, which increases cortisol and often intensifies cravings, but through systematically rebuilding microbial diversity, restoring gut barrier integrity, and stabilizing the hormonal environment in which both cravings and food choices occur. I hope this reframed something important for you today. Drop a comment and tell me how long you've been in this loop. I genuinely read everything. If this resonated, hit the like button and share it with someone who has been trying to fight their cravings and losing. And if you're new to NutriFlow, subscribe and hit the bell. This is exactly the kind of conversation we have here. See you in the next one.